Welcome to today's web tips about working with solution data in Evolve. My name is Kent Engel, and I'm a senior process developer at Clear Process Solutions. So solution data in Evolve is basically the replacement for SharePoint list data for a particular process that would have been available in Foundation. So the purpose of setting up a solution data library is to store the promoted fields that exist in a particular solution's requests so that you can reference that data in other processes. So as I mentioned, that kind of emulates the functionality that existed in Evolve. The only drawback really is that it requires more setup because this functionality was kind of, default in Foundation, where anytime you launch a request, the promoted fields that you had set up in that solution were just automatically, existed in the SharePoint list for that solution. But that's not quite the case here. You will still see those promoted fields in the document library, but that data isn't easily accessible from other requests or other solutions without creating a solution library. So the method to accomplish this is to first promote the fields that you want to use and save data for, which the process for that is the exact same from Foundation. But the additional setup that's required is creating the solution data library within that solution, which I will be showing in a bit. And this can be created as either a global library or a library that exists at the app level. So that just depends on where you want to use your solution data library, if it needs to exist for use in solutions across apps or just within a singular app. And then you have to essentially map the columns. So create columns for the solution data library that pertain to the promoted fields that you have. And the mapping process is pretty simple, and we'll go over that as well. And then finally, you'll have to create a plugin at the beginning of the workflow at a minimum to insert the solution data into the library, which is easy to configure as well. And I guess the only caveat here is that, where in Foundation, all of the data would update automatically when a task was submitted. That's not exactly the case here. So you'll kind of need to strategically place these plugins around the workflow to update solution data as the process moves on. So without further ado, we will get into the demo portion. So this is a little form that I have set up, which emulates a business partner search functionality. So what I'm going to do is search for a business partner number. I'm going to choose one here. And we'll see that data populate down below. And in the solution, which I'll show you just a minute when we submit this, you'll see that pretty much all of these fields that I have here are promoted, and we'll be able to see that in the solution data library. So if I submit this, I'm going to open up the actual solution and navigate to the solution data here. So this is where I was mentioning it could be either a global library or an app level library. So KAngle is the name of my test app in our Clear Process Solutions environment. So that would be the app library. So this would show up for whatever app you're currently in. And this is the global library. So these libraries are available across all apps on your Evolve site. So I don't believe that this has been inserted quite yet into the library, but if you select the library and click View Data, okay, now it's in there. So this was a test that I ran earlier, but this is the test that you just saw me run. And these are all of our columns, and we'll get to the setup in just a moment. So you could see that all this data exists here, which pertains to those fields that you saw in the form. So when it comes to setting this up, as I mentioned before, kind of the first step is to figure out which fields you want to be represented in your solution data library and promote them to promoted fields. So as you can see, as I click through these, you'll see exactly like it was in Foundation and Composer. You see the promoted field name in brackets that I've chosen for these fields. If you're unfamiliar with setting up promoted fields, you could do that in the properties here, promote to solution field. And this one I named business partner, BP title, because simply the name title is already a reserved field. We don't want to use title as one, name one, so on and so forth. So it's important to name these accurately and remember what you name them, because once you actually create the solution data set, I'm going to create this on the app level. I'm not actually going to create it. I'm just going to show the process. BP solution data, name the solution data library, something that you'll remember. You could put a description in here as well if you'd like to. And here is where these field names would need to match those solution columns. So name one was an example of one of the promoted fields that we had. And then you would want to match the field type to the data type of what the field is. So most of them I would imagine are going to be strings, but there's some times where you might have a date, or you might have an integer or a decimal. So make sure you set the field type. And once you're finished with these two, and the name at a minimum, you can click add field, and you'll see that populate down here. And if you misconfigure something, you can press the trash can to delete the field here. Unfortunately, I don't believe you can actually edit these individual entries as you add them. But if you need to remake one because you messed something up, or the field name that you typed in here doesn't exactly match the promoted field and you need to redo it, you'll have to delete the field and then go through the process of adding it again. So once you populate those fields and continually click add field until you've got all your promoted fields, you just click OK down here. I'm going to click cancel because I'm not actually going to create this one. We've already got one created, but you click OK here. And once you click OK, you would see that solution data library show up here. Now you, of course, won't have any data like you're seeing here until data is actually populated in there. And again, as I said, this process of populating the solution data doesn't happen automatically. So if you want to populate data in there, you would create an action plugin. The plugin name is Update Solution Data Library. And for the parameters, you would select the data library that you want to update or insert into, which ours is named BP test data. So you can see here, you see the global ones, you see the app level ones. Ours was at the app level. And then the operation, insert, update, upsert, and delete. So insert, of course, inserts a record. Update, updates a record. And that's where you might use this query to determine which record you want to update. Usually you'd use the title as a reference because the title of the solution is typically unique, or maybe you have a request ID that's promoted. You could use that as well. So if you're updating, you would put that in the query. And then upsert is either insert or update, depending on if a record exists. So for the upsert, I believe you would put a query in here, and if the query does not return data and there isn't a data set based on the query, then it would insert. If the query does return something, so something exists already in the solution data library, it would instead update that existing data set. So if you want to just easily duplicate nodes in case there's a few places in the workflow that you need to update the data, you could just have them all listed as upserts and then create a query which finds something based on a unique value, which again usually would be the title or the request ID if you have that configured. And that's about it. Once you go to the solution data here, and after you submit some requests, you can navigate to that library and see data populating in here. So again, just kind of review the purpose of why you would do something like this. There are certain scenarios where it might be necessary to reference the data of another solution or another request. So generally, we see requirements like this when you're doing a change to data in SAP, or you're inserting data into SAP, and you're launching requests for that, and you want to ensure that there aren't duplicates of items being created in SAP, and you want to make sure that if you're updating something in SAP, there isn't already an existing request out there which is trying to update data, because you don't want two requests that are competing for the same data set being updated, because that can get a bit messy. So a scenario where this might be used in is exactly that. If you were updating some data in SAP, you can set up the form to first query your solution data library to see if certain data from SAP is already in process. And if it already is, then disallow the user from submitting the request. So it kind of emulates that functionality that you saw previously in SharePoint and Foundation. I hope you found this helpful today. If you have any questions, you can contact our team at www.clearprocesssolutions.com or send an email at info@clearprocesssolutions.com. And if you found this helpful and like to see more content like this, you can subscribe to WebTips at www.clearprocesssolutions.com/webtips. Thank you and have a great day.